Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to the Altibox Norway chess tournament in 2022. So we're following now an epic game from the round 2. It's now Wesley versus the world champion Magnus Carlsen, and the first game they played today ended in a draw. So the classical time format game ended in a draw, which meant now by the rules of the Altibox tournament they had to play an additional Armageddon game in which Wesley had 10 minutes on the clock, Magnus Carlsen had 7 minutes on the clock, but Wesley needs to win the game with the white pieces. If the game ends with a draw, or of course with a losing game for white, then Magnus gets the whole point. So as I said, this is quite a dynamic game. Many times in chess history we have seen beautiful Armageddon games with really some ups and downs, and this game was also quite a roller coaster with really tactical ideas for both sides, with mistakes, of course, with blunders also, we have to say it. But the Armageddon game is always a pleasure to watch, with really some wild opportunities for every player. So let's see now what happened. Let's see now the thriller of the Armageddon game here by Wesley against Magnus Carlsen. So Wesley opened with the move e4. Magnus' response was e5, knight to f3, knight to c6. After bishop to c4 we have the Italian game, and Magnus went into the so-called two knights defense. Many times you can also try to attack with knight to g5, but here d3 was played by Wesley, so he played more of a classical system, fixing the pawn structure and developing also the dash with bishop. So Magnus goes with bishop to c5. We have bishop to g5. This is of course a very annoying pin sometimes to handle, but if you play with the dash with bishop like this in the Italian game, you can many times expect some ideas of black with h6 g5. So don't get surprised even if your opponent plays h6 g5 here from black's perspective. If he kicks away your bishop to g3, even if of course these moves are weakening a little bit the pawn structure in front of the king on the king side, but many times black is simply playing this idea. So don't be surprised if you face this very annoying h6 g5 follow-up. So here after move bishop to g5 we have h6 immediately by Magnus Carlsen, bishop to h4, and now d6, liberating also the long diagonal for the light for bishop. So here c3, preparing here to move d4. So that's why here a6 was played by Magnus Carlsen. He is now liberating also the long diagonal for the dark bishop, because many times the dark bishop becomes an object of the attack, and then you want to have some good squares in order to escape with the bishop. So here after move a6 we have now a4 by Wesley, so he's not also allowing some b5 ideas here by Magnus Carlsen. So we have now bishop to a7. Magnus hides with the bishop on the most active square, and the bishop now on a7 is becoming actually the best minor piece of blacks. You'll see the importance of this bishop in the continuation of the game, but this is in many occasions in the Italian game really one of the best bishops that you can really have, because it's aiming toward the f2 square. And as I said, we can also expect this follow-up with g5, so the bishop could be many times endangered. Then we're trying maybe with knight to h5 to attack the bishop further on g5, and then you don't have any more good protection around the square f2. So this bishop is very important in the continuation of the game. So we have here knight from b to d2 by Wesley, so normal development. We have queen to e7, and now kingside castling, and it's almost like Magnus waited finally Wesley to castle on the king side, and now he finally pushed his pawn on g5. So don't be surprised, this is not a mistake by black. Many times it's a mistake to play this h6 g5 follow-up, because you're weakening also a little bit your light squares, but in the Italian game it's really possible. You can even stay a little bit longer with the king in the center here from black's perspective. Nothing went wrong, so it's now really a wild Italian game. So after move bishop to g3 we have knight to h7. Here Wesley is trying first of all to protect the g5 pawn. He's trying now Magnus Carlsen is trying, of course, knight to h7 is an idea to protect your g5 pawn, and now you want to play h5 g4 h4. So you want to play sort of a minority attack with these pawns against these two minor pieces here of white. So these white pieces are becoming actually a huge tactical problem now in the continuation of the game, because black is trying to attack them with this pawn. So we have here b4 by Wesley. So Wesley is trying a counter attack here on the queen side. We have knight to f8. Magnus is also searching for opportunities to place the knight maybe on the beautiful square on f4 here. We have now b5, knight to a5, attacking the bishop on c4, and here bishop to d5. We have c6. c6, kicking away the bishop, bishop to a2, and now knight to g6, aiming of course this very cool square here on f4. So we have now rook to b1, and now after a takes b5, a takes b5, here Magnus plays maybe his first inaccuracy. He plays now the move c takes b5. This is really unnecessary because first of all, you're messing up your pawn structure, and the most important thing I think here to realize is that actually you're inviting your opponent's rook into the game. So now the rook could cause maybe some tactical damage in the near future. I think we can expect maybe some d4, d takes e5 idea, so maybe you could lose a little bit the battle around the square e5. So it's very unpleasant to invite your opponent's rook somehow into the game. So that's why, in my opinion, black doesn't have to take out the pawn. Black can also wait, can play even g4, kick away the knight, and then black could maybe gain some activities here on the king side. Then probably white needs to counterplay here with the move b6, and then the game leads into a simplified line, I think, for both sides, which will be of course very good for black because black needs only a draw. Now black can take g takes f3, of course. White needs also to take out now the bishop on a7, but now we can take out this pawn on g2, and Magnus would probably also have to take then this pawn, and I think this is a playable position for both sides. But Magnus played, as I said, c takes b5, invited now Wesley So's rook into the game, and the rook becomes now really a tactical beast in the continuation of the game. You see also the importance of this rook in this tactical game. So here knight to c6 was played by Magnus Carlsen, improving now the position of the knight, and now comes the first really mistake here by Wesley. So he played really necessary move bishop to d5, and in many occasions this will be a perfect move because nothing wrong with this move. You're attacking the knight, you're centralizing the piece, but actually this is now a huge mistake. A better idea would have been knight to c4, and look at this now. As we said in the beginning, this is now quite unpleasant, I think, attack that you can handle. So many times black is trying to proceed with the move h5 here, but actually there is now a beautiful tactical shot, knight to g5. So here this move knight to c4 is actually preventing this move h5 that Magnus Carlsen would love to play, because if now knight to g5 happens, then if you take queen to g5, then we can take out this one, knight to d6, and look at this, also the pawn on f7 is saying. So I think black is getting the tactically destroyed for sure. So you don't have to maybe after move knight to c4, you don't have to maybe after h5 knight to g5, you can also play h4, but actually it's even worse because you have again this idea knight to f7. If you take with the king or with the queen, it doesn't matter, then you have a beautiful discovered attack with the bishop. Look at this, and the game is over, I think, here for black. Black can play maybe king to g7, we can take king to g7, and I think with bishop to f4 and now rook to g5 again, black is facing many positional and tactical problems, so it's a much better position here for white. So that was moves unfortunately Wesley So missed. He should have played knight to c4. He played now bishop to d5, and here Magnus Carlsen uses this moment immediately. He plays now the move h5. So Wesley So really missed his tactics. Now he has to play the move h3 in order to liberate the square for the bishop, because the threat is this move h4 that could of course trap the bishop on g3. So yeah, that's why you have to play h3. We have now g4. Magnus uses now this moment and activates now the attack on the king side. So we have h takes g4, and now after move knight to h2, we have knight to f4 by Magnus Carlsen, and now we have d4 here by Wesley. So he's trying now, of course, to deflect the pawn from the defense of the knight, and he's simply trying to grab the piece. So we have here knight to h5 by Magnus Carlsen. This was a good choice, because as we said in the beginning also of this video, we want to play knight takes g3, and then if f takes g3 happens, then look at this, then this bishop is becoming really the best minor piece on the board. And in the continuation of the game here, Wesley So played knight to b3, and now comes a crucial mistake, I think, here by Magnus Carlsen. He played a passive knight to d8 move, and I really don't understand this move, because he should have simply played this normal idea, knight to g3. Look at this, and this game is, I think, simply won here for black, because after move f takes g3, now we're sneaking in with the queen to g5. Look at this, the serious threat is actually the queen to e3 move, followed with queen to g3, and then you lose the knight. In order to defend the square e3, you have only two choices. You can play queen to e2, this is a normal normal idea, but then actually with queen to h6 you're losing the game. That's the problem. And you look at this, you don't have any escape routes for the knight, so the knight is basically paralyzed here, so it will be game over. So what you could do is maybe instead of this move rook to, queen to e2, you can play rook to e1, protect your e3 square, and then you have at least some kind of a square for the knight. But actually it's not even better, because the black would have this possibility, queen to g7. Look at this, there is now beautiful tension around the square d4. In order maybe to paralyze the position around the square d4, you have to play bishop to c6, undermine the piece that is attacking the d4 square. Now after b takes c6, you still have to battle for the d4 square. You have to now also paralyze the bishop, but actually black is winning the game with this one. E takes d4, look at this, c takes d4, and now after bishop to d4, whatever you do, if you take with the knight, we'll take out the rook. If you take with the queen, then of course we take the queen, the knight gets deflected from the defense of the rook, and here white it has lost the exchange, so black should be winning here for sure. So you see now this move knight to d8 is simply not working, it's simply too passive. Magnus could have won immediately the game with the move knight to g3. Unfortunately for him, he missed this tactical sequence. So after move rook to knight to d8, here Wesley so plays now the correct move. He realizes that this bishop is quite unpleasant, so that's why he's trapping sort of the bishop. Is pinning the bishop to the rook, and now in the continuation of the game we have knight to g3, but it's simply too slow. Magnus missed his opportunity. Now this tactic is not working, because look at this, after f takes g3 again Magnus is trying queen to g5, but now with rook to e1, even if you try, let's see this previous line with queen to g7, then actually the position can be defended with this one. This is now the way to go here, and even if you take, of course, we simply take out here the bishop, and it's simply game over. So this is not working anymore. So as I said, after move rook to e1, even if you try here this idea queen to h5, maybe to build this battery on the h file, black can defend this position by playing move knight to f1, and okay, you have maybe one check, but we can still escape, and here I think white should be slightly better. So okay, Magnus plays again knight to c6, which is really I really didn't understand why he played so many times with the same piece. He again played the knight on c6. We have bishop to c6, b takes c6, and now after move queen to a1, we have now this battery on the a file. The bishop is hanging, so that's why Magnus has now to counterplay with this idea, rook to b8. Wesley so simply takes out the bishop on a7, rook to b3, and now Magnus plays a beautiful Wesley so plays a beautiful idea, queen to a7. If the rook moves somewhere, then checkmate could be possible here on around the square f7, so that's why you have to play rook to b7, cover everything, and now Wesley so simply took, Magnus also took, and now with queen to a7 the bishop is endangered, so that's why here bishop to c8 has to be played, and here Wesley so continues the pressure against the bishop, and Magnus finally castles. Okay, finally Magnus Carlsen has secured the king. The position is again about the equal, so black should probably make a draw here, although maybe white is slightly better. Here Wesley so played, of course, knight to f1. He's trying to reroute the knight on e3, and then also to the square f5. So we have here e takes d4, c takes d4, and after queen to f6 we have a rook to d1, protecting now the pawn on d4. And now comes a new mistake by Magnus Carlsen, c5, and this okay, this is maybe not a mistake that loses the game immediately for black, but actually with d5 you can really simplify the game till the end. Now white needs to play e takes d5, c takes d5, knight to e3. Maybe it's a possibility to attack the bishop, the pawn on d5, but now the bishop can protect the pawn on d5. Now we have to play something like queen to f4, maybe to simplify the game, but still with king to g7 maybe this battery could work. And even if queen to f4, g takes f4 happens, then with f5, okay, this is not an optimal bishop, of course, that's blocked out by its own pawns, but the game is so simplified that actually it's even hard for white to make some kind of a progress here. So this game I think Magnus Carlsen would draw for sure, but he played c5 and allowed now Wesley so to take d takes c5. We have d takes c5, and now for queen to c5 Magnus loses a pawn, which is very, very important. So but still, even if you play now the best moves now from black's perspective, again this game should probably lead into a draw, but I'm not sure what happened now to Magnus Carlsen. He played this dubious moves, knight to d8, knight to c6, knight to d8, so he played too many times with the piece. He sacrificed also here the pawn, missed also some opportunities. I'm not sure what happened. Probably he's not playing his best chess. He's not really playing his best chess through the whole tournament. So as I said, this is not the Magnus that we know. After move queen to c5, now here Wesley so has a slight advantage. Wesley so got challenged with the move bishop to e6, but now with knight to e3, Wesley simply improves the position of the knight. So we have here rook to c8, we have queen to d6, queen to g5, and after queen to f4, here Wesley is hoping that Magnus takes, and he could actually now improve a little bit his pawn structure. Still, it's unclear, but probably again this game should enter in a draw. But after move queen to f4, now Magnus makes the main mistake of the game, and from this point on the game is over, because he played now queen to c5. He tried a counter-attack against the knight, but now with the move mid to move e5, here Wesley so is locking the queen. The queen is paralyzed, the queen cannot be used in order to defend the king, and now the serious threat is of course a beautiful check on g5. So again, a new mistake by Magnus Carlsen. He was under time pressure, we have to say, but it's not really likely that you see many times Magnus Carlsen playing the game like this. As I said, I'm not sure what happened to him today. After move e5, we have rook to e8. Now Wesley plays this beautiful check. We have king to h7, king to h2, rook to g8, and now after queen to h4, we have a beautiful check, king to g7, knight to f5. This was now stunning tactic that Wesley so pulled off. It's really hard to see this tactic, but actually it's the only way to make a win here for white. After bishop to f5, we have queen to f6, a check, and now here Magnus Carlsen loses also the bishop, and Wesley plays now a couple of checks. In this position, Magnus Carlsen resigns. So why did it resign? Because now actually Wesley so can grab all of these pawns by delivering some annoying checks. So for instance, he can play here queen to h4, you have to move the king here, and the problem is now after queen takes g4, you can never really move the king towards the center of the board, because you get rook to d8, and then you lose also the rook. So you have to stay with your king on h7 and also on g7. So you can maybe try to continue the game like this, but again we play a new check, again a new check, again queen to f6, a very important check, and now we grab also this pawn. You have to cover now with the rook, and now after queen to h5, king to g8, look at this again, this rook comes into the game on the square d8, and the game is over. So it's something that I think black needs to resign immediately. So Magnus Carlsen resigned. Unfortunately, he missed his tactics, but he made also too many blunders and mistakes in the continuation of the game, lost the game. Wesley so won the game. Okay, maybe we'll see Magnus Carlsen in better shape in the next couple of rounds, but this was simply too much that he pulled off today. He played simply too many mistakes against such a respected grandmaster like Wesley So. So okay, really wild stuff. I hope that you enjoyed the game. This was really a roller coaster with really some ups and downs. First Wesley had the winning game, then Magnus had the completely winning game. He missed that, and then eventually Magnus made this blunders in the end game stage and lost the game eventually. So okay, if you want to see more games from this super event, check out my coverage so far with some other great games that we have seen before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.